The chamber is open and full of whispers.
Before we get into it, if you want exclusive lore breakdowns, chapter timelines, and members-only videos that never make it to the main channel, the link is in the description. Everything lives on the Patreon. The cellar of Godric's Hollow smells like chalk and burnt stone. Regulus Black has been in it for 6 hours. The bassinet stands at the center of the room on a square of unbleached linen. Not sentimental cloth, a specific grade, untreated, sourced from a Muggle textile merchant in Leeds who had no idea what he was supplying. The grade matters. Treated fabrics carry residual enchantments from the manufacturing process. Residual enchantments give the soul anchor something to misread. The soul anchor cannot be given anything to misread. Regulus measured and cut the square himself. He laid it himself. He checked it twice before placing anything on it at all. Lily had already stripped the stone when he arrived. He'd come down expecting to spend an hour on preparation and found the floor bare to its oldest layer. Nothing, not a trace of prior household magic, not a cleaning charm, not a residue. He had stood at the bottom of the stairs and looked at the blank floor, and then looked back up toward where she was waiting, and said nothing. Because there was nothing useful to say, she had understood the requirement without being told. He should have expected that. He was only beginning to understand what it meant to work with someone who did not require explaining. Regulus draws the final binding line at 10:11 p.m. The ward is not visible to the naked eye. This is by design. What he has constructed, 6 hours by candlelight using chalk compounds that took 4 months to source across 3 separate suppliers, following a sequence lifted from the 3rd volume of the Black Family Grimoire, the one Sirius always called the one that actually frightens me, is less a spell than a mathematical argument. It carries no incantation, it requires no sustained intent from its caster. Once the binding sequence is complete, it operates not on what Regulus is feeling at the moment of activation, but on what he was when he designed it. Preset, pre-decided, magic made from a decision already made and locked in place. The philosophical premise is not complicated. Killing curses carry a soul fragment. The minimum viable payload required to make death intentional rather than accidental. 20 years of Horcrux work has left Tom Riddle's soul in a condition Regulus would describe, clinically, as critically unstable. Each split fragment seeks resolution. Each one is more volatile than the one before it. What Voldemort sends into this room tonight will not be a clean curse. It will be a fragment looking for a vessel. A soul anchor catches anything soul-adjacent and reflects it inward. The ward does not negotiate. It does not assess the caster's power, or certainty, or intent. It reads the fragment, brackets it, contains it behind a memory-binding seal before the fragment can embed past the initial impact layer. The execution requires absolute nerve and a willingness to let the curse land. Regulus straightens. His knees have not been right since the cave. He blows out the candle nearest the bassinet. Somewhere in London, at 9:44 p.m., Peter Pettigrew stood inside a telephone box on a street whose name he had already stopped caring about. He made a call, he gave an address. He did not look at his own reflection in the glass. He was afraid. This was, and had always been, the only consistent fact about Peter. Voldemort does not arrive dramatically. He walks up the garden path. This is exactly what Regulus told them 3 nights ago when the debate was still running. He will not announce himself. He will not waste power on theater when he believes the outcome is certain. He has the address. He has the assurance of a secret keeper who gave it freely. He is, in his own estimation, the most powerful magical practitioner alive. He has cleared worse houses than this one, and left faster. He intends to be home before midnight. Regulus is still in the cellar when the Fidelius barrier breaks. He doesn't hear it. He feels it through the ward's peripheral network of faint systemic pressure change, like a building settling into a storm. New presence on the property. The ward begins its calibration sequence. Upstairs, the plan holds. James and Lily are not on the stairs. This had been the longest argument of the 3 nights. James's instinct was to meet Voldemort at the door, wand raised, body between threat and son, which was also the instinct of every decent parent and the exact liability Regulus could not afford. He had spent 40 minutes explaining this. The ward needs the curse. The curse requires a clear arc to the target. Interposing James in the corridor means James dies and the ward sits in the cellar having caught nothing. James had agreed. It had cost him something visible to do it. They are in the nursery. Lily stands by the crib with Harry against her shoulder, her wand in her free hand running a secondary diagnostic on the ward's upper nodes. James is at the window with his hands flat against his thighs, not reaching for his wand, which is the hardest thing Regulus has ever asked of anyone. Outside, Sirius holds the apparition boundary, and his orders are to not move until the ward fires, which is the second hardest. The ward finishes calibration at 10:43 p.m., 17 minutes since the barrier broke, longer than Regulus had planned for. He adds this to his working file on Voldemort, more thorough with an apparently simple target than reported. Useful data. He will write it down when this is finished. A door opens above him. The ward fires 21 seconds later. Regulus perceives it as a contraction, not an explosion. Explosion implies outward force, energy released, a system overwhelmed. This is the inverse. The ward draws in, it does the precise work it was built for, and the feedback travels back through the chalk lines in the stone into the binding points at the four corners of the room, down through the foundation into the diagnostic nodes 12 inches below his feet. He reads it the way a surgeon reads a pulse, not with feeling, with attention. The killing curse lands, the soul anchor catches, the rebound sequence initiates. What the ward finds embedded in the curse is exactly what Regulus calculated. A fragment of Tom Riddle's consciousness, the minimum viable payload, loose and vectoring toward a vessel. The containment protocol identifies it in the first half-second, brackets it. The memory binding seal wraps it before it can penetrate past the scar layer. The fragment does not find a host. It finds a wall. Harry screams. The scar forms. Tom Riddle's body drops in the room above the cellar. Regulus does not move for 11 seconds. He is reading the diagnostic feedback in its entirety. Thoroughness is not optional. It is what kept him alive in the cave, and it is what will keep Harry alive through whatever comes next. The ward held at full structural integrity. The fragment is contained. Harry's vital signature is altered. The ward's permanent presence will read as unusual magical resonance to anyone who examines the scar closely, which means they need a prepared explanation before anyone from the Order or the Ministry arrives, and they need it within the hour. He adds it to the list, then he caps the chalk, picks up the grimoire, and climbs the stairs. The nursery is sharp with burnt wood and the copper edge of discharged soul magic. The bassinet's paint has scorched along the upper right rail. Lily is on the floor with Harry in her arms, running a full diagnostic with her wand hand while Harry screams. James is against the far wall. His wand is in its holster. He had not drawn it. Regulus notes this with something that is not quite pride, but is close enough to qualify. Sirius comes through the window, at a run. He has been at the apparition boundary for 6 hours, and he moves like a man who spent those 6 hours being refused permission to act. He's gone. His voice is flat, measured, held level at visible cost. I felt the wards. He's gone. No one answers him. Regulus looks at the scorched rail. He looks at the chalk still marking his fingers. He thinks about the locket sealed in its box in the Grimmauld Place vault, one Horcrux destroyed, and one the hardest year of his life, and still only one. The locket wasn't enough, he says. Sirius looks at him across the room. How many more? Lily has not looked up. James has not moved from the wall. Harry is still crying, and the sound of it fills the room, and no one asks for it to stop. Sit down, Regulus says. All of you. The unbreakable vow is made at 11:34 p.m. The cellar still smells like ozone and scorched paint. Regulus speaks the binding. He wrote the terms himself, in the 3rd week of October, the night after the full council agreed on the plan, and he understood that the plan was only as strong as the people executing it. The terms are Harry's survival above Dumbledore's strategy, above ministry law, above the operational requirements of any other objective, above, in the final calculation, their own continued existence. Sirius extends his hand without being asked. When the golden cord wraps his wrist, his expression does not change. Not from restraint, from certainty. He has been certain about this since the night Regulus walked back into his life with a stolen locket and 6 words and waited for a response. James extends his hand and the cord is halfway formed before the tears come. He does not look away from the binding, he does not apologize for them, and no one asks him to, because his hands remain steady throughout. That is the only thing that matters. Regulus understands both of them precisely. Sirius does not grieve what he cannot yet see gone. James grieves everything in advance because it is the only way he has ever found to face it clearly, and not flinch at the critical moment. Different instruments, the same resolve. The vow closes. The cord disappears. Above them, Harry sleeps in Lily's arms. His scar is 3 hours old. The fragment behind it is sealed and dormant, and waiting. The war that everyone said was finished is only now beginning. Remus keeps notes. This has been true since his Hogwarts years, when the habit began as a survival mechanism and gradually became something he could not operate without. The notebook in question lives on the second shelf of the Grimmauld Place Library, between a 1743 edition of Practical Dark Countermeasures and Sirius's copy of Quidditch Through the Ages, which has been in that position since Sirius was 16 and will probably outlast most of the people in this house. The notes are not sentimental. They are records, lessons planned, outcomes observed, adjustments made. After a decade, they have become something close to a field study. The study's subject arrived at Grimmauld Place weighing 6 pounds and 11 ounces, and spent his first winter learning the specific acoustics of a house full of adults who were trying very hard to be quiet around him. Harry, Remus has concluded, learned to read rooms before he learned to talk. The question that occupies the notebook, the question Remus has been building toward for 10 years without ever writing it directly, is whether they made him that way, whether that is a cost or a gift. He has not resolved it. He suspects it is both. 1985. Harry is 5. Lily does not teach magic. This is the first and most important thing Remus observed about her method in the sessions he watched from the library doorway in Harry's 5th year. She teaches the preconditions for magic, intent, precision, the specific gap between wanting a result and producing one, which is where most wizards live their entire careers without ever examining it clearly. She sits with Harry on the library floor and moves objects, ordinary objects, a wooden block, a cup, a small brass compass that had belonged to James's father. She moves them and names what she observes, not for Harry's benefit, for her own. She is building a developmental map of magical response time, cataloging the lag between desire and result. When Harry is 5, she stops moving the objects. She asks him to. He cannot, of course. Not reliably, not yet. What she is interested in is not the result, but the method. The way Harry's face changes when he concentrates, the direction his attention travels, whether he is reaching for the outcome or for the process that produces it. "What are you trying to do?" she asks him the third time he fails to levitate the compass. "Move it," Harry says. "No." She says, not unkindly, "What are you trying to do to your own intention?" He has no answer for this at age 5. He will have one by age 7. When Regulus hands him a wand for the first time and he casts Wingardium Leviosa on the 3rd attempt. Not the first, the 3rd, which is 2 attempts more than Lily had allowed herself to hope for, and precisely what she had calculated. The standard in this house is not Hogwarts level. It never has been. 1987. Harry is 7. Regulus begins. The chess sessions start as chess sessions. By the 2nd month, Remus understands they are not chess sessions. He watches from the doorway once, in the 4th week when Harry has lost every game so far, and shows no sign of stopping. Regulus does not adjust the difficulty. He does not offer encouragement. He moves his pieces and explains, each time Harry loses, exactly where Harry's information was incomplete. Not where Harry's strategy was wrong, where his information was wrong. "You moved the knight because you thought I would protect the bishop," Regulus says. His voice carries the specific flatness of a man who considers imprecision a personal failing. "Why did you think that?" "Because you moved the rook to threaten it. And if the rook was not protecting the bishop, if the rook was a question I was asking you?" Harry looks at the board. "Then I answered the wrong question," he says. "You answered the question you were shown. Those are different things. Try again." He resets the board without ceremony. What Remus is watching, and what he records in the notebook that evening in 2 careful sentences, is the construction of a foundational principle. Whoever controls the information wins. Not in the fight, before it. The fight is the last thing, the least interesting thing, the thing that only occurs when one party has already lost the real contest and doesn't know it yet. Harry beats Regulus for the first time 4 months later. Regulus responds by switching to 3-dimensional chess. Harry considers this response for a long moment, and then says, with the particular precision of a 7-year-old who has been listening very carefully, "That's not actually about chess, is it?" Regulus almost smiles. Remus writes it down. 1988. Harry is 8. Remus begins. He starts with primary sources, not textbooks. Primary sources, eyewitness accounts, original correspondence, documents produced by people who were present rather than by people who decided afterward what the presence was supposed to mean. The Goblin Rebellion of 1612 takes 3 sessions. Harry has already read the Ministry Summary, which runs to 2 paragraphs. The eyewitness account Remus reads from runs to 37 pages and contains, among other things, significant evidence that the uprising was in direct response to ministry provocation that the summary does not mention. Harry is partway through a drawing of what appears to be a tactical diagram when he looks up and says, "The pamphlet is wrong. Not different. Wrong." "Yes," Remus says. "On purpose?" Remus considers the question seriously before answering. It deserves to be considered seriously. "Yes," he says. Harry is quiet for a moment. Who decides which one people read? This is the question Remus has been waiting for. He does not answer it immediately. He asks, "What do you think?" What Harry produces over the following 20 minutes is a working structural model of institutional narrative control, expressed in the vocabulary of an 8-year-old, but correct in its basic architecture. He is not asking what happened. He is asking who benefited from a particular version of what happened being the one that circulated. Remus writes in the notebook that evening, he doesn't trust narratives. He trusts documents. This will either save his life or make him impossible to reassure in a crisis. Probably both. 1989, Harry is 9, Sirius begins, Harry meets Hermione. The dueling sessions are nothing like the others. Lily teaches precision. Regulus teaches skepticism. Sirius takes Harry into the basement training room and systematically removes every assumption Harry has constructed about how magic is supposed to work, and then requires him to solve the problem anyway. He is not gentle about it. "Wrong," Sirius says, while Harry's disarming charm passes 4 inches to the left of its mark for the 3rd consecutive attempt. Again. "I know it's wrong." "Then why are you repeating it?" Harry has no answer. He tries something different. He misses again, differently. Sirius does not soften his expression. This is, Remus has come to understand, the gift Sirius offers that none of the others can provide. He is the first person in Harry's life who makes failure uncomfortable in a way that cannot be absorbed or processed away. Lily's disappointment is precise and therefore surgical. James's is warm and therefore navigable. Regulus simply resets the board. Sirius leaves the failure exactly where it is and waits for Harry to close the distance himself. Harry, to his considerable credit, keeps closing it. 6 months in, Sirius sits down on the training room floor after a session and tells Harry about Peter Pettigrew. Not an edited version. Not an account adjusted for age. The full record, the phone box, the address given, the 12 dead muggles on a London street, the staged death, the 3 weeks of silence while an innocent man processed a guilt that wasn't his. Harry listens without moving. "He's still alive," Harry says, when Sirius finishes. Sirius indicates, with a slight movement of his head, the small cage in the training room's far corner, the one Harry has been peripherally aware of for 8 months and has never until this moment asked about directly. Harry looks at it. The rat inside does not move. "Why?" Harry says. "Because he's more use alive. And because it was your father's decision." Harry is quiet. He looks at the cage for a long time with the expression Remus recognizes as his thinking face. Not anger, not grief, just the careful assembly of a new structural model. Then he picks up his wand. "Again," he says. It is Remus who takes Harry to the Bloomsbury Library that autumn, on one of the Thursday afternoon excursions James calls normal world immersion, which in practice means Remus sits in the periodicals section with a cup of tea and lets Harry go where his attention takes him. On the 4th Thursday, Harry stops at a table in the reference section. Remus watches him approach a girl with a great deal of brown hair who is working through a book on logic at a speed that implies she has been doing this for hours and sees no reason to stop. She does not look up when Harry arrives. Harry, who has been trained since birth to observe before speaking, stands and watches her for 30 seconds and then says something Remus is too far away to hear. She explains something without looking up. Then something else. Then Harry asks a follow-up question, and she puts down her pen, closes her notebook, and turns to look at him properly. He sits down. 3 hours later, Remus collects him. On the way out, he notes the name on the library membership card displayed on the table, Hermione Jean Granger. He tells James that evening. James asks who she is. His second, Remus says. By the following year, the Granger family's dentistry practice will have received 3 referrals from new patients whose connection to Remus's network of contacts is technically coincidental. Hermione will attend the best primary school within walking distance of Grimmauld Place's secondary address. Remus does not consider this interference. He considers it the only responsible application of available information. 1990. Harry is 10. James begins. The operational briefings are weekly, 1 hour every Sunday morning, In the study James has claimed on the ground floor where the map of known Death Eater movements has lived on the wall since 1982, James tells Harry everything. Not the edited version, not what Harry needs to know to feel safe. Everything, the Horcrux campaign, the current intelligence on remaining anchors, the political positioning, the Lupin precedent's legal architecture and why it matters, the reversionary clauses Regulus built into the Black family property leases, and what they are waiting to activate. He is not preparing Harry for Hogwarts. Remus understands this from the first briefing he observes. He is preparing Harry for command. For the moment, at whatever age it arrives, when Harry will need to make decisions that affect everyone in this house, and everyone outside it, and the quality of those decisions will depend entirely on the quality of his prior knowledge. Harry sits across the desk from his father every Sunday morning and takes notes. His handwriting is neat. He asks questions only when he has something specific to add to his existing model. He does not ask for reassurance. At age 10, he has never asked anyone in this house for reassurance. Remus writes this in the notebook, and then sits for a long time without adding anything. A note on Remus himself, in the same decade. His lycanthropy is managed through a combination of Regulus's gray magic supplementation. Soul Anchor protocols applied specifically to the transformation threshold, which reduce the violence of the change if never its occurrence, and whatever potion work exists at the frontier of current alchemical research. The transformations are controlled, if never comfortable. Regulus developed the supplementation framework in 1983, and has refined it twice since. He has never discussed the cost with Remus directly. Remus has never asked. This, Remus thinks, is also the kind of thing you write down and then don't add to. Spring 1991. Remus does not attend the Weisengamot Spring Social. He does not attend ministry social events. As a policy, the Lupin precedent is legally sound and socially untested, and there is no strategic value in providing Fudge's Circle with a werewolf to discuss over canapes. He hears about the Snape conversation the following morning from Sirius in the Grimmauld Place kitchen. Severus Snape has been at Hogwarts for a decade. He has, in that decade, built a specific architecture of psychological dominance designed for deployment against students who arrive without preparation, students who are overwhelmed, deferential, uncertain of their standing. He has been building it in particular for Harry Potter. The famous scar, the famous name, the boy who has never been told what he is, who arrives confused and hungry for structure, and who can therefore be shaped. Sirius had spoken to him for 90 seconds. "What did you say?" Remus asks. "That Harry's been Occlumency trained since age 8. Sirius pours his tea. That Harry knows the full history of the Lily Evans situation, including Snape's specific role, including the date he passed the prophecy to Voldemort. That Harry will not be performing helplessness for his benefit. Remus considers this. His response, he didn't have one. Sirius sets down the pot. That was the point. Remus thinks about Snape. The decade of investment, the psychological framework assembled in careful layers, waiting for a specific target to arrive at a specific disadvantages. The entire structure predicated on one variable, that Harry Potter would come to Hogwarts not knowing who he was. The variable does not exist. Remus opens the notebook. He writes the final entry dated before September 1st. The battlefield was cleared before the battle. This is what 10 years of preparation looks like. He closes the notebook, puts it back on the second shelf, leaves it between the countermeasures text and the Quidditch book. Then he goes to tell Harry it's time to pack. The Hogwarts Express departs at 11 exactly. Harry has been on the platform since 10:15. Not because he was nervous, because James had told him, at age 8, that arriving early to any new operational environment is not caution, it is reconnaissance. You walk the ground before it fills with other people's intentions. He and Hermione find a compartment near the middle of the train, while the platform is still sparse. They take seats facing each other, pull out the files, and begin. The files are Remus's work. A decade of compiled intelligence on the Hogwarts staff, the student intake from prominent wizarding families, the political alignments of the parents, and 3 pages of structural notes on Dumbledore's headmasterly tenure that James had written himself and handed to Harry that morning without ceremony. For context, James had said. Not for action, not yet. Hermione works through the Slytherin intake. She does this without pause, turning each page with the efficiency of someone who reads the way other people breathe. She reaches Draco Malfoy. She lingers here. Harry watches her expression do something precise and cold. His father lost the diary evidence hearing in June, Harry says. I know, I read it. She closes the Malfoy file. He'll arrive thinking the family's position is what it was. That's useful. She opens the next file. Yes, on the train, somewhere past Reading, she says what they have been circling all morning. The conversation that began the previous week in the Grimmauld Place library, and hasn't finished. That Hogwarts, as a curriculum, has not been updated in significant ways since Dumbledore's appointment. That the defense position turns over annually. That the Muggle Studies course hasn't reflected actual Muggle society since 1963. That the structural conditions for blood status discrimination are embedded in the school's administrative framework in ways that are technically optional and practically treated as fixed. She is not angry when she says this. She is specific. This is, Harry has found, more useful than anger. Not this year, he says. No. She stacks the files. But eventually, they watch the countryside. The files are put away. Between Oxford and Birmingham, they reach the section of the journey where there is nothing left to prepare, and they sit in silence. Which is a different kind of preparation. Hogwarts is large. Harry had expected this. What he had not adequately anticipated is the quality of its wards. He feels them on the lake crossing, a layered sequence of old castings, some predating modern wand work, the architectural signature of a structure that has been protecting children from each other and from external threats for 1,000 years. The wards don't resist him. They note him, the way a building notes a new weight on its floor. He files the sensation under useful data, return to later, and keeps moving. Hermione, beside him in the boat, says quietly, the ward depth on the North Tower is different, older than the rest. And there's an anomaly on the 7th floor, a section of corridor where the ward architecture doesn't resolve cleanly. It keeps reading as transitional space. Dumbledore keeps restricted texts under environmental warding up north, Harry says. Remus thought it was contamination control. The 7th floor anomaly I don't have an explanation for yet. She nods and files it the same way he does. When they have enough time and enough information, they will investigate both. Tonight is for different work. The Great Hall is everything the files described. 4 long tables, floating candles. The ceiling charmed to mirror the sky outside, which Lily had explained was an arithmetic extension of a modified observational charm, dense enough to require quarterly maintenance and specific anchoring runes at the chamber's 4 load-bearing columns. Harry locates 2 of the columns and estimates the positions of the others before the procession of first years reaches the front. Then he looks at the staff table. He finds Quirrell in 12 seconds. The man is mid-table, wearing a purple turban, both hands around a goblet he hasn't lifted in the 4 minutes Harry has been watching. Harry runs the soul reading the way Regulus taught him. Not a scan, not a deliberate search, simply an openness to what is already present. Every person in the room carries a soul signature, a specific weight and texture individual as a voice heard through a wall. You don't see it, you register it the way you register temperature. Quirrell carries 2. Harry keeps this information on the inside of his expression, which is a skill that took 2 years to develop, and which Regulus had never once praised him for, because praising it would imply it was unusual rather than expected. He sits on the information through the entirety of the sorting, through the hat's song, through the alphabetical procession of names, through Hermione's sorting, which takes 4 seconds and produces Gryffindor without apparent complication, through his own. His own sorting takes longer. He asks the hat, privately, to place him where the strategy dictates, not where his instincts push, where the tactical position is strongest. The hat is quiet for a moment that stretches considerably beyond what the Gryffindor table seems to know what to do with. Your instincts and your strategy align, the hat says, in the specific interior tone of something that has been reading 11-year-olds for 1,000 years, and doesn't often encounter this configuration. That's rarer than you appear to think. He joins Hermione at the Gryffindor table while the hall works through its applause. After dinner, from the dormitory, he sends Remus a coded letter, 2 ixnitures, defense position, standing diagnostic requested, gray magic classification suspected. The cipher reads as a question about transfiguration prep to anyone who intercepts it. The owl returns within 48 hours. Confirmed, gray magic, soul parasitic answering, monitor, report changes, do not engage, assessment incoming. The naming arrives with the diagnostic confirmation, Regulus's shorthand. The first time the classification appears in writing between them, and it appears matter-of-factly, the way Regulus names all things as established fact, not introduction. Regulus will have a full diagnostic within 3 weeks. This is not a prediction. It is knowledge of Regulus's operational pace, which has never varied in Harry's lifetime. Potions, second week of term. Snape enters. Harry has the man's file organized in memory. Every section Remus compiled, every note James added, the index card in Regulus's handwriting that read simply, skilled, compromised, approach with precision, not sympathy. Snape's opening is exactly as Remus had predicted. Not a lesson, a sorting mechanism designed to identify which students flinch, which ones reach for approval, which ones can be managed across 7 years through the consistent application of public inadequacy. He asks his questions into the silence of 11-year-olds who have never been in a potions classroom, and have not been told that the first class is not about potions. Neville Longbottom, 2 seats left, goes very still. Snape's gaze reaches Harry. Potter, the name carries the precise weight of a decade of anticipation. Our new celebrity. Harry meets his eyes. He presents Snape's surface legilimency with a calm, organized surface that yields nothing of consequence. 3 years of occlumency practice, Regulus's standard. Sir, Harry says, tell me. Snape moves with the deliberateness of a man accustomed to movement generating anxiety in his audience. What would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood? A sleeping potion of exceptional strength. Draught of living death. The specific potency depends on whether the asphodel is prepared by desiccation or direct reduction. Reduction intensifies the sedative compound but reduces the active window by approximately 30%. Harry pauses. Labadius Borage doesn't cover the reduction variant in the standard text. The comparative analysis is in most Patente potions, 3rd edition, chapter 11. The dungeon is very quiet. Snape deducts 5 points for impertinence. This is the mechanism Remus had described. If the student answers correctly and completely, locate a procedural violation. The objective is not accuracy, it is hierarchy. Harry notes the transaction and says nothing further for the remainder of class. That evening he files a formal academic appeal under Hogwarts Charter Law. Section 14, Clause 3, no house points shall be deducted for academic responses provided in answer to direct faculty questioning during instructional periods. Remus had shown him the clause in 1990. Harry had memorized it on the 3rd reading, because that was the standard in his house. McGonagall resolves it before breakfast, in Harry's favor. The points are restored. Snape does not call on Harry in the following class. He does not do so for the remainder of the term. The framework assembled across a decade, calibrated specifically for a boy who arrives at Hogwarts as a known quantity without actually being known, requires a target who doesn't know the framework exists. Harry had known it existed before he boarded the train. Snape adapts, he is competent enough to adapt, but the opening is gone. He does not get a second one. The Quirrell operation runs from mid-November to the 2nd week of December. Between Transfiguration essays and the first Quidditch practice Harry attends as a spectator. Regulus arrives at Hogwarts in November's 3rd week using a black family concealment technique that predates Dumbledore's detection ward architecture by 2 centuries. He runs a full diagnostic on Quirrell across 48 hours. The results arrive through the cipher. The soul fragment is parasitic rather than full possession. Voldemort attached to Quirrell in Albania. When Quirrell made the specific error of going looking for what remained of the Dark Lord, and finding something that was still capable of finding back. The fragment is coherent. It is looking for a re-entry mechanism. It believes the Philosopher's Stone is behind the 3rd floor door. What Regulus proposes is not a confrontation. Harry and Hermione build the conditions over 2 weeks, carefully, quietly, without the kind of visible investigation that generates witnesses. They move through the information environment the way Regulus had taught, with questions rather than answers, apparent misdirections that are actually invitations. One deliberately misfiled library request Hermione ensures ends up visible on the wrong reference shelf. They let Quirrell find the right corridor. They let him solve the right sequence of protections. They arrange through a chain of managed observations for the stone's apparent location to resolve itself logically toward the Mirror of Air-Eyes. What they do not arrange, what Regulus arranges, in a conversation with Dumbledore that Harry is told about afterward but not present for, is the stone's actual position. It is not in the mirror when Quirrell reaches it. Regulus is. The diagnostic node pulses at 2:31 a.m. Harry is in the Gryffindor common room. Hermione is across the table with a charms text she is not reading. The node pulses once, holds for 4 seconds, and goes still. They do not discuss it. They go to bed. In the morning, Dumbledore announces that Professor Quirrell has taken sudden personal leave. His tone is managed, the specific quality of a man deciding in real time what the morning's information requires him to share and what it requires him to contain. He calls Harry to his office at 11. The office is circular, full of instruments Harry catalogs in the first 30 seconds, 2 diagnostic orbs, a pensieve under a dust cloth, a bird on a perch that is not currently a bird, a desk that has been in this room since before the current headmaster. The largest orb goes dark as Harry enters. Dumbledore had something running on it. He closes it before Harry can note the targets. Harry sits. Dumbledore looks at him for a moment in the specific way of someone deciding how much they already know. "You identified Professor Quirrell's condition in week 1, Dumbledore says. "Yes, and you contacted your family rather than coming to me. I didn't have actionable intelligence yet. Regulus did by week 3. The response was proportionate to the information available. You arranged the resolution. We arranged the conditions, Regulus arranged the resolution. Harry keeps this distinction precise because it is precise. He was already inside the castle. We gave Quirrell somewhere to be." Dumbledore is quiet. He picks up a lemon drop from the dish on his desk and holds it without eating it. The window behind him shows December grounds, white and still. "You're 11 years old," he says. Not as protest, as observation. "Yes," Harry says. Another silence. Longer. Something moves through Dumbledore's expression that is not quite surprise. He is too old and too careful for surprise to reach his face unprocessed, but is related to it. The look of a man revising a model he has held for a long time. "The stone is safe," he says. "Quirinus will recover. The fragment has been adequately addressed." He pauses. "What remains of it will find another vessel in time. You understand that?" "Yes." Harry stands. Standing first is a decision, not a discourtesy, and he has made it. We'll be ready for it when it does. Dumbledore does not ask him to sit back down. On the spiral staircase below the office, Harry notes the personal wards around the door, older than the school's standard architecture, deep, specifically shaped, the kind a man builds over decades when he has learned that knowing too much makes you a target. He files it without judgment. He goes back to class. The summer briefing had been longer than usual. James spent 3 Sundays in July mapping the diary's provenance, Regulus's intelligence from intercepted Death Eater correspondence, the Black family research on Voldemort's Horcrux construction timeline, the specific gap in the evidence chain that connected the diary's last confirmed location in the Malfoy Manor library to wherever it had gone afterward. The gap was not an absence of information, it was a deliberate concealment, which meant someone knew what it was, knew what it could do, and had made a calculation about deployment. "It'll be planted," James said. "Not sold, not lost. Planted. He'll want it somewhere it operates without direct oversight." "A student," Harry said, "the youngest, least prepared one available." They had spent the following 2 weeks mapping the incoming first-year cohort. Hermione had done most of the analytic work, running a social vulnerability assessment through the lens of blood status politics, producing a list of 6 names ordered by exposure risk. Ginny Weasley was at the top, not because she was weak, because she was the most visibly enthusiastic new entrant from a family with no defensive preparation, no contact with gray magic theory, and a father whose habit of collecting Muggle artifacts was treated by the institutional culture around him as an eccentricity rather than a marker of the family's complete informational isolation from the war that was still being quietly fought around them. Harry had filed it. He had gone back to Hogwarts, knowing what the year contained. Regulus's monitoring network was in place before term began. He had threaded it through the school's peripheral ward architecture during a maintenance consultation in late August, a Black family advisory visit, technically legitimate, framed as a historical ward review for Dumbledore's records. The network was passive, non-intrusive, designed to detect soul signature anomalies in the student population. After Quirrell, they had a confirmed diagnostic baseline. They knew exactly what contamination looked like at the residue level. They found it in the 2nd week of September. The host was Ginny Weasley. The source was a diary she carried everywhere and had been writing in every night since the first day of term. Hermione identifies it independently, 2 days after the network flags it. Not through Regulus's external data, through her own diagnostic work applied from inside the school. She has been watching Ginny since the sorting with the patience of a monitoring brief running in the background of everything else, cataloging the behavioral signatures of soul contamination in a young host. Unexplained fatigue, dissociation between action and conscious intention, gaps in recollection that Ginny fills with plausible but structurally inconsistent explanations. She brings Harry the documented record on a Tuesday evening in the common room. She's been writing in it every night, Hermione says. It writes back. She thinks it's a friend. How far along is the contamination? Early. No full possession events yet. The fragment is still building rapport. She sets the file down. We have time, but not much. Harry sends the cipher that night. Regulus responds within 24 hours. The diary's sole signature matches a confirmed Voldemort construction, pattern identical to the Quirrell diagnostic. He has also, in the same 24 hours, traced the entry chain. Ginny's supply purchases at Diagon Alley, the family's shopping trip, a specific encounter at Borgin and Burke's on the 31st of August. The Provenance letter ends with a name, Lucius Malfoy. Harry sends it to James. James sends back 2 words. Good. Wait. They wait 3 days, long enough for Regulus to confirm through secondary channels that Ginny is not yet in immediate danger, long enough for the Provenance chain to be fully documented before anything in it is disturbed. 3 days is the cost-benefit calculation. It holds. On the 4th day, Hermione recovers the diary, not by force. She finds Ginny in a corridor between classes and tells her, quietly and completely, what the book is. Not a softened version, the accurate one, what a Horcrux is, what it does to its host, what is being built inside her every night she writes in it. Ginny hands it over after Hermione finishes speaking. Her hands are shaking. She is in the hospital wing within the hour. Hermione files the diagnostic with Pomfrey as a curse exposure requiring monitoring, provides the specific contamination data without attribution, and answers every question Pomfrey asks with the level of precision that closes the conversation efficiently. Ginny sleeps for 14 hours. She wakes disoriented but structurally intact. The diary goes to Regulus, who seals it in a lead-lined case with a blood binding and a memory seal. He examines it for 2 hours in an unused room on the 7th floor, whose ward architecture Hermione had flagged during the lake crossing, the space that keeps reading as transitional, that doesn't resolve cleanly on any diagnostic grid. It presents itself differently each time they need it to. Regulus says nothing about this. He simply uses it. Then Regulus sets down the case and says, before we destroy it, we read it. Harry looks at him. A Horcrux is a record, Regulus says. The fragment carries Riddle's consciousness at the moment of creation. It knows what he knew then, about the other anchors, about his methods, about the gaps in what he considered secure. His voice carries no enthusiasm for this. It is a calculation presented as a calculation. We extract what's useful, then we destroy it. This is gray magic. There is no clean version. Harry considers it for the length of time it deserves. Show me, he says. 2 weeks later, on a Saturday in late October, Harry opens the Chamber of Secrets. Regulus has been in Myrtle's bathroom for 45 minutes. He looks at the plumbing, at the snake-marked tap, at the concealment architecture of something designed to be opened by exactly one type of practitioner, and his expression is the expression of a man confirming what he had long suspected. The parcel tongue comes from the fragment. Harry has understood the mechanism since Regulus explained Horcrux physics at age 8. The scar fragment carries Voldemort's soul signature, and Parseltongue passed through it like a secondary inheritance, a bloodline ability that does not belong to Harry, but has been resident in him since he was 15 months old. It does not feel borrowed. It does not feel like anything except that when he opens his mouth at the tap, the pipe listens. The entrance opens, they go down. The chamber is not what the name implies. Harry had built an image of it over 2 years, assembled from Remus's historical files and the particular gravity that everyone who mentioned it assigned to the subject. He had expected something that matched its reputation, a space designed for confinement, for threat, for the specific architecture of power expressed as dominance. What he finds is a space of considerable intellectual precision, long, cold, the vaulted ceiling higher than the floor plan suggests it should be, the stone along both walls carved with serpents at a density and resolution that implies not decoration but inscription, each serpent positioned in a deliberate relationship to the others, forming a continuous interlocking text that runs the full length of the chamber. The grammar is pre-modern Parseltongue rendered in stone. It is not a warning, it is a treatise. Regulus walks the length without speaking. He stops at the far end in front of the great carved face above the altar and looks for a long time. It's a library, he says. Not to Harry specifically. The observation is directed at the room. Not a monument. Not a weapon. He runs 2 fingers along the nearest serpent carving without entering the groove. The wards are storage architecture. The basilisk is the lock. The Parseltongue is the key. Salazar Slytherin built a gray magic archive and allowed 1,000 years of institutional fear to serve as camouflage. The basilisk is in the far channel. Harry hears it, the slow, vast respiration of something old enough that the word barely applies. It registers his presence without hostility. He registers it back. It does not move. He speaks to it briefly in the language that sits below conscious intention. It tells him, in the flat descriptive register of something that has no use for narrative, that it has been here for centuries, and that the man who placed it here smelled like rivers and cold iron. It does not ask to be released. It asks, with the immense patience of its age, to be left alone. Harry tells it he will not disturb it again unless he has to. It returns to sleep. They catalogue for 3 hours. Regulus photographs every inch of the carved wall. Harry transcribes the altar inscription in his notebook using the phonetic mapping Remus had taught him for archaic script. By the time they surface through Myrtle's flooded bathroom, they have the beginning of a record that Hermione will spend the next 4 months translating, and which will contain, among other things, 3 soul magic techniques that Regulus will later confirm as having no equivalent in any modern text. They do not destroy anything. They leave the chamber intact. The Wisengamot session is called for November the 17th. Emergency session invoked under Ancient House Charter provision James Potter requesting. The chamber fills at mandatory pace. Emergency sessions require full attendance, and the particular combination of James Potter invoking a charter session, with the Quirrell incident recent, with Lucius Malfoy's prior diary hearing in institutional memory, produces the quality of attention that belongs to a room that knows it has been assembled for a purpose and is trying to determine the shape of it in advance. James stands. He presents the evidence in the sequence Regulus structured, soul signature documentation first. The diaries confirmed Voldemort construction, pattern matched against the Quirrell diagnostic record. The technical analysis rendered in language the chamber can follow without requiring fluency in soul magic theory, which James delivers with the specific gift he has for making technical information feel like common sense. The tone of a man explaining something that should have been obvious to everyone present considerably earlier. Then the provenance chain, document by document, Borgin and Burkes's transaction ledger, obtained through Black family solicitor's formal request, the Diagon Alley supply record cross-referenced against the Weasley family's August shopping trip, the specific afternoon of the 31st, and the specific hand that placed a specific object into a 10-year-old girl's school cauldron. Lucius Malfoy sits in his hereditary seat and arranges his expression with the practiced composure of someone who has navigated hostile sessions before. He did not know the diary's nature. Found it in old manor storage, no provenance, assumed harmless. Naturally, he would never, the child's well-being of paramount concern. His profound regret. Sirius stands. "This is Dobby," he says. The house elf beside him is wearing a clean pillowcase pressed and stitched with the Potter crest at the hem. He has been under House Potter's formal protection since the 22nd of August, arranged through 11 days of legal work by James's solicitor, and one conversation between Sirius and Lucius at a ministry function that Lucius had not understood was operational. Dobby is small. He stands very straight. His eyes are the eyes of someone who has recently discovered that the specific fear that organized his entire life is no longer mandatory. He testifies for 14 minutes. He does not waver. He does not embellish. He describes the diary with precision, its location in the manor study, the evening it was removed, the instructions given regarding its placement, the words used in those instructions, which he repeats verbatim. House elves remember speech made in their presence with total fidelity, because they are never expected to repeat it. This has been true for centuries. It becomes, in this chamber, on this afternoon, the most inconvenient fact in Lucius Malfoy's life. The chamber is very quiet when Dobby finishes. Lucius Malfoy makes no further statements. The vote strips his Wizengamot seat pending criminal investigation. 31-6. The 6 names are noted by James's solicitor and filed. Sirius and Dobby leave through the main doors. In the corridor outside, Dobby had reached up and taken Sirius's hand. Sirius had looked down, said nothing, and kept walking. It was not a performance. It was not arranged. It was simply what happened. Lucius Malfoy watches it from the chamber floor as the doors close. He will think about it for a long time. This is, of course, the point. The maze is a problem Harry has already solved. He solved it in March, when the third task's parameters were confirmed, and he and Hermione spent 3 evenings building a complete structural model of how a magical maze functions at the ward level. The directional enchantments, the creature placements, the dead-end logic. He solved it again in April, running contingency trees for each plausible obstacle type. By June, the maze is not a test he is preparing for. It is a corridor he is walking through to reach the thing that matters. Cedric Diggory stays close on his left through the first quarter of the maze, which they had agreed on in their last training session. They communicate in the hand signals Sirius had taught Harry at age 10, the same ones the Marauders had used during order operations, adapted for two people moving through structured magical space. Left corridor, confirmed. Sphinx ahead, bypass right. When a blast-ended Scroot comes through the eastern passage, Harry casts a reductor at the ground ahead of it, and Cedric seals the gap it retreats through. They reach the cup with 11 minutes remaining. Harry looks at it for exactly 2 seconds before touching it. The tracking ward he had placed on it in October, during the Task 1 debrief, is a black family ward marker, passive, invisible to standard diagnostic charms, keyed to his blood signature. It has been active for 8 months. He knows the port key terminus to within 3 feet. He knows the timing window. He knows who will be there. He looks at Cedric. "Stay close," Harry says. This isn't the end of the task. Cedric, who has spent 8 months training with Harry, and understanding that Harry is always describing a real situation in precise language, nods once. They grip the cup together. The graveyard is cold and dark and already occupied. Harry registers this before the portkey nausea fully clears. The specific quality of warded space, the ward boundary pressure that Regulus had spent 10 years teaching him to feel on his skin like a change in air density, anti-apparition, anti-portkey exit, perimeter seals, the architecture of a prepared ground, not Voldemort's preparation, theirs. Wormtail is at the riddle grave. He has a knife. He is shaking in the specific way he has been shaking, on and off, for 13 years. The full-body tremor of a man caught permanently between the magnitude of what he did and the impossibility of undoing it. He looks at Harry across the graveyard, and what crosses his face is relief and horror in the same instant, which is the face of a man who has spent months hoping the plan would fail and dreading that it wouldn't. He raises the knife toward his own arm. He gets it to the critical point, the exact threshold of completing the ritual's second requirement, and his hand stops. Not because the vow holds him down, because it kills him if he goes through with it. This is the distinction Regulus had explained precisely in 1984. The binding is not a restraint on the body, but a death sentence on the act. Peter raises the knife, reaches the threshold, and understands, with the absolute clarity of a man whose defining characteristic is that he will not die for anyone, that completing the motion kills him. He has been terrified of this threshold every day for 10 years. He knows its exact coordinates. He stops. His hand is steady, his entire body is not. He stands with the knife half raised, unable to proceed, unwilling to retreat, caught in the specific hell of a man who betrayed everyone he ever loved, and now cannot even complete the act his new master requires without paying the price his old friends had the foresight to name. "You can put that down," James says. He and Sirius apparate in from the perimeter simultaneously, 2 points on the graveyard's boundary that they had surveyed 3 days prior, and marked for arrival coordinates. They are not running, they are not performing urgency. They move into the graveyard the way trained people move through operational space, with the economy of motion that belongs to people who have rehearsed the exact situation and found, on arrival, that it matches the rehearsal. Sirius takes Wormtail. Efficiently, the knife is gone before Wormtail has finished processing that James is real and present, and has been alive for 13 years, and is standing in a graveyard at midnight, looking at him with an expression that contains no anger at all, which is somehow worse than anger would have been. "The wards are up," Regulus says. He is at the graveyard's northern edge. He has been here for 40 minutes. The Death Eaters arrive in 3 waves across the following 12 minutes, summoned by the dark mark that Voldemort's contingency agent had triggered from outside the wards before Regulus sealed the perimeter. They arrive expecting a resurrection site and find, instead, an occupied graveyard with no exit. James has a list. He has been building it since 1982. Names, confirmed allegiances, outstanding charges. Evidence status on each. The list is not exhaustive. It is specific. It contains 17 names that are present tonight, and he works through them in the order Regulus had prioritized by threat level. This is not shown with glamour. There is no dual choreography, no sustained exchange of killing intent between equals. There are people who apparate into warded space and cannot leave, who face 2 of the most capable combat wizards of their generation, and one gray magic occultist who has spent 13 years preparing for exactly this location and this night. The disarmaments are fast. The bindings are the Black Family Restraint Protocol, soul-keyed, non-removable by anyone other than the caster. Regulus moves through the eastern section. Sirius takes the western approach. James manages the containment. Cedric Diggory stands at the cup and watches, and his expression is the expression of someone who had been told in training that this was possible, and who is discovering what the gap between told and witnessed actually feels like. 3 people are with him, 2 men and a woman Harry does not recognize. The legal analyst James had brought as independent magical witnesses, holding recording instruments that capture every spell cast, every person restrained, every word spoken on this ground. The third is a ministry obliviator named Marcus Vane, who has been present at 17 events involving the Potter Black Network since 1987, and who has, in each case, chosen not to perform the assigned memory modification because Sirius has been holding a documented record of his 1986 unregistered legislamency conviction for the same length of time. Marcus Vane watches the graveyard with the resigned expression of a man who understands that he is tonight becoming a witness rather than a mechanism of erasure, and that the distinction will be permanent. Voldemort arrives at 12:34 a.m. Not through the ritual failed. Peter's flesh was the designed mechanism, and the designed mechanism is unavailable. What he has instead is a contingency prepared in 1993, when Regulus's intelligence suggested the Peter asset had been compromised, and Voldemort, who does not survive decades by trusting single mechanisms, had identified an alternate restoration path. It is slower, less stable, and requires a servant present from the beginning of the night rather than Peter's specific contribution. The servant is among the 17 already restrained. The body he returns to is functional. It is not optimal. The magic is present, the consciousness is present, the intention to kill is present. But it is a restoration performed on a timeline he did not choose, through a method he considers secondary, into a scene that his intelligence had assured him would be controlled. The scene is not controlled. He materializes at the center of the graveyard to find his Death Eaters subdued and bound in a ring around him, a perimeter ward that allows entry but not exit. James Potter standing 20 feet away holding a wand, and the realization arriving in the same second as his first breath in a corporeal body that the intelligence was wrong and the sight was prepared, and he has walked into a counter-operation that has been running since before he initiated this one. He does not freeze. He is not capable of freezing. He casts 2 killing curses in the first second, one at James, one at Harry, and both miss because the positions he casts at are not the positions they occupy, which is the first thing Regulus teaches any student of gray magic. In prepared ground, you are never where the enemy last saw you. What follows is 40 seconds. He is the most powerful practitioner alive. This remains true. What is also true is that he is operating in a body that is 30 seconds old, on ground that has been warded against him specifically, facing opponents who have been studying his documented casting patterns since 1982. He breaks the perimeter ward through sheer force at the 38-second mark, a raw power application that Regulus will later describe as technically remarkable, and disapparates in the gap it creates. He is gone before the ward reseals. He is not triumphant. He is alive and corporeal, and he will return. But he has left behind 17 bound Death Eaters, a complete witnessed record of his restoration, and the knowledge that the people waiting for him in that graveyard had known he was coming. He will think about what that means for a long time. The legal record is sealed and signed by the 3 analysts before 2 a.m. Cedric Diggory provides a witness statement under veritaserum at his own request. He makes this offer himself, and the precision of it, Harry will think later, says something significant about what kind of person Cedric Diggory is. Marcus Vane provides a ministry witness declaration, his hands steady throughout the signing, his expression the expression of someone who has made a decision that cannot be unmade and has decided to stop regretting it. James has the complete record packaged and in transit to 3 separate locations before the graveyard is cleared. 1 copy goes to Gringotts, filed under the Potter Black Legal Archive. 1 copy goes to Harry. Cornelius Fudge refuses to acknowledge the record on the morning of June the 25th. He does this in a statement delivered through the ministry's press office, citing procedural irregularities in how the evidence was gathered, and questioning the jurisdiction of the analysts employed. The statement is 18 sentences long and contains 11 passive constructions. Harry reads it over breakfast in the hospital wing, where Madame Pomfrey has placed him for observation following the Portkey transit and the 40 seconds in the graveyard and the particular quality of tired that accumulates from a night that has gone exactly to plan. He reads the statement once. He hands it to Hermione, she reads it in 2 minutes and looks up. The International Confederation, she says? Yes. She opens her notebook, the letter takes 90 minutes to draft. Harry Potter, Black. Lord in training of the House of Potter and the House of Black, formally submitting a complete witnessed magical record of Voldemort's confirmed bodily restoration to the International Confederation of Wizards with a request for formal acknowledgement under the Confederation's 1689 treaty obligations regarding confirmed Dark Lord activity. The letter cites the British Ministry's documented refusal to engage with the submitted evidence and requests that the Confederation note this refusal in its own proceedings. It is not an accusation, it is a filing. It is the application of a specific legal mechanism to a specific factual situation. The letter goes by Special Owl that afternoon. By the following morning, 12 foreign delegations have issued formal acknowledgments of Voldemort's confirmed return. The Swedish and Romanian responses arrive within hours of each other. The French ministry's acknowledgment contains a specific reference to Fleur Delacour's witness statement, which she had filed through Beauxbaton's diplomatic channel without being asked. Fudge's press office issues a second statement by midday. It is 9 sentences. 7 of them are passive constructions. His political credibility does not collapse in a single moment. It dissolves over the following week as each new foreign acknowledgement lands, and the gap between what the international record shows and what the British ministry is willing to say becomes impossible to characterize as anything except a choice. Fudge chose to look away from confirmed evidence. Everyone who is paying attention can see the choice. He cannot unchoose it. Dumbledore does not need to manage any of it. He does not need to do anything at all. He sits in his office on the morning of June the 26th and reads the Confederation's acknowledgments as they arrive, and the expression on his face, which Harry will hear described second-hand from McGonagall, who passed his door that morning and noted it without comment, is not satisfaction and is not relief. It is the specific look of a man who has spent 40 years being the most indispensable person in the room, sitting with the evidence that he isn't, and beginning the slow work of deciding what that means. Fudge's response to the International Confederation's acknowledgments was Educational Decree 22, then 23, then 24, issued across September and October, in the specific escalating cadence of an administration that knows it is losing ground and is converting institutional authority into direct control as fast as the legal mechanism allows. Each decree arrived at Hogwarts in the form of a ministry owl and a framed proclamation that Argus Filch affixed to the entrance hall wall with the enthusiasm of a man who has been waiting for institutional permission to be difficult. Each decree was a further compression of Dumbledore's operational independence, staffing approval, curriculum review, student activity restriction. Umbridge appointed High Inquisitor in late September, under powers that Fudge had spent the summer quietly lobbying through a sympathetic Wisengamot subcommittee, was the instrument of all three. Harry had read the decrees as they arrived. He had read Umbridge's inquisitorial portfolio, obtained through a Black family legal contact who had access to the ministry's published appointment schedule. He had noted the specific sequence, 22's staffing authority, 23's curriculum scope, 24's prohibition on unauthorized student organizations, and understood that the sequence was a prepared architecture, not an improvised one. Umbridge had been planning this since her November observations in third year. The study group had been running since third year as well. Harry had started it in October of year 3 without calling it anything, because the first thing Regulus had taught him about operating within institutional structures was that named things attract institutional responses and unnamed things do not. It was not a club. It was not a society. It was 20 students from across all 4 houses who had been receiving over 2 years a level of supplemental magical instruction that bore no formal relationship to the Hogwarts curriculum whatsoever. The invitation process had been Hermione's design, a specific kind of question posed in a specific kind of class, one that most students would answer conventionally, and a small number would answer with something that indicated they were already thinking past the question's stated premise. The students who gave those answers received a brief, private conversation. The ones who asked the right follow-up questions to that conversation received an address and a time. 20 had made it through the full sequence over 2 years, not 20 at once, a rolling cohort, some from year 3, some from year 4. All 4 houses, which had required a particular quality of patience from some of the early Gryffindor members, who had found the first Slytherin invitee disorienting and had required a 40-minute conversation from Harry about the fact that house divisions are administrative categories, not cognitive ones. By the time Umbridge arrived at Hogwarts with Decree 24, the 20 students in this group were operating at levels that the standard curriculum would not reach for 2 more years. What Harry and Hermione had taught them was not grey magic. Grey magic, the Soul Anchor protocols, the ancestral ward sequences, the pre-intent casting architecture that Regulus had been building into Harry since age 7, was beyond the operational range of most adults and the developmental range of anyone in this room. What they taught was the foundation of grey magic thinking, which is a different thing, and a considerably more dangerous one in its long-term effects. The first session of Year 5 held the 3rd week of September in the same unused classroom on the 7th floor they had been using for 2 years, opened with a question Harry had borrowed from Regulus. Why is the killing curse illegal? The answers came in the expected sequence. It kills people. It cannot be blocked. It is a tool of dark wizards. It is categorized as unforgivable. Harry waited until the sequence was complete. Those answers describe its effects and its uses, he said. None of them explain why it is legally classified as it is. Because it kills. Susan Bones began. Diffindo kills. If applied to the right target. Transfiguration kills. Expulso kills. None of those are unforgivable. Harry moved to the board. The unforgivables are categorized as they are because of the specific intent alignment they require. Crucio requires sustained malice. You cannot cast it from detachment. The spell collapses without genuine desire to cause pain. Avada Kedavra requires genuine killing desire, not abstract willingness, but active specific intent. The law is not responding to the spell, it is responding to what the spell requires from the caster. The room was quiet. Daphne Greengrass, who had been the first Slytherin invitee and had subsequently become the most rigorously analytical presence in the group, said, "So if you could cast Avada Kedavra without genuine killing intent, the spell doesn't work. Magical law is classifying something that already self-selects for its own misuse." Harry set down the chalk. Grey magic argues that the good-evil binary in standard magical education is not a magical framework. It is a political one. It describes historical patterns of use, not inherent properties of the magic itself. He watched this land. Different faces, different processing times. Neville Longbottom, who had been in the group since Year 3, and who had, over 2 years, discovered a wandless precision with herbology that no one in the room had a theoretical framework for yet, was writing quickly. Luna Lovegood, who had joined in Year 4 and who approached every session with the focused attention of someone who had been waiting for the specific conversation, had stopped writing entirely. "That changes how I've been reading the curriculum," Luna said. "Not as objection, as documentation." Yes, Harry said, that's the point. This was, in practice, what Regulus had built into the sessions since Harry was 8. Not a body of knowledge, but a method of knowledge acquisition that metabolized received information differently. The students who went through it did not become better at casting, they became better at asking what casting was for, which produced better casting as a secondary effect. Hermione had written 11 pages of theoretical notes on this distinction in Year 4, and presented them to Remus, who had read them and said without looking up from the last page that she had correctly identified the core mechanism of advanced magical development and might consider expanding it into a text. She was working on it. Umbridge discovered the group on October the 15th. She did not discover it through surveillance. She discovered it because Anthony Goldstein, a Ravenclaw 5th year who was not in the group, and who had noticed that 20 of the most capable students in his year appeared to be learning things he wasn't, had filed a formal complaint with the High Inquisitor's office. Harry received the inquisitorial summons at breakfast on the 16th. He attended Umbridge's office at the specified time, sat in the chair she indicated, and waited while she built her opening through the specific administrative scaffolding she favored, the forms, the clipboard, the framing of what was about to happen as a regrettable procedural necessity. Educational Decree 24, Umbridge explained, prohibited any student organization, society, team, group, or club without explicit inquisitorial approval. The gathering of students Harry had been facilitating fell within this prohibition. He was required to provide a complete list of attendees and confirm the group's dissolution. Harry produced the charter document. Umbridge looked at it. It was 3 pages, drafted by Remus in 1990 and updated twice since, registered with the Wisengamot's Ancient House Records Division, under the Noble House tutorial arrangement provision of the Household Ward Exemption Framework. The operative clause was 3 sentences. A lord or lore master of a noble house holds the right to extend tutorial instruction to any person of their choosing, under house authority, without ministry approval or restriction. Such instruction constitutes a noble house function and falls outside the scope of ministry educational jurisdiction. Educational Decree 24 does not and cannot apply to noble house tutorial functions, as the tutorial arrangement predates the decree's legal authority by 3 years of registered filing. It was not a counterargument. It was a document that had been waiting in a registered archive for 5 years for exactly this conversation. Umbridge's expression did exactly what Harry had predicted it would do when she read it. "I will be taking this to the Wizengamot," she said. "I expected that." James convened the Educational Review Board on November the 2nd. The provision was obscure, buried in Hogwarts' founding charter in language that predated the ministry by 4 centuries, which was why it had never been used, which was why Regulus had identified it in 1989 when he was reviewing the charter's original Latin text, and had noted it to James with a single annotation: "Keep this. It will matter." The provision stated that heads of ancient and noble houses retained the right to demand a formal review of educational standards at any chartered magical school in Britain, convened by the Wizengamot's Educational Subcommittee and attended by all current heads. The review would assess whether the school was meeting its foundational obligation to provide complete and current magical education to the students in its care. The specific framing of the complaint James filed was not about Umbridge's decrees. It was about the curriculum they had produced. In the year since Umbridge's appointment, 3 core courses had been modified to remove practical casting in favor of theoretical assessment. Defense Against the Dark Arts, now taught by a Umbridge-appointed ministry lecturer who had never cast a defensive spell in a contested context, had no practical component at all. The review board assembled, Dumbledore attended. His support was quiet. He did not lead, he did not argue, he provided requested documentation of the original curriculum standards, and noted when asked directly by the board's chair that the modifications made under Decree 22 had reduced practical instruction in defense by 63% from the previous year's delivery. He said nothing further. He sat and watched the board work through the evidence James had assembled and the specific legal argument Regulus had structured, and his expression was the expression of a man who has been outmaneuvered in a chess game he didn't know he was playing, and has chosen, at this particular board position, to allow it. Umbridge was not present at the review. She had filed objections through 3 separate procedural channels in the preceding week, each of which had been addressed in advance by James's solicitor, with the specific rejoinder that the review's authority derived from the founding charter, and not from any ministry decree, and that no decree issued after the founding charter's ratification could constitute grounds for procedural objection to a founding charter provision. The review concluded in 6 hours. The finding was unanimous. The curriculum as currently delivered fell below the foundational obligations of the Hogwarts Charter. Umbridge was required to vacate the position of High Inquisitor under the board's remediation order, which superseded her ministerial appointment because the board's authority was older than the ministry. She was escorted from the castle the following morning by Clara Finch, head of magical law enforcement, Sirius's appointee, who had since her appointment demonstrated a consistent and documented commitment to applying the law with precision rather than political preference. Finch escorted Umbridge to the main gates, handed her the board's remediation order, and wished her a courteous good morning. The decrees did not fall immediately. Several required individual Wizengamot challenges that ran through the spring, each handled by James's solicitor with the unhurried efficiency of a legal team working through a list. Dumbledore walked the corridor outside the Inquisitor's office that afternoon after Umbridge was gone, and the proclamations were being removed from the walls. He stopped in front of the empty mounting points and stood there for a moment. McGonagall passed him on her way to class. "Albus," she said. He turned. His expression was difficult to read. Not unhappy, not relieved. Something more considered than either. His father's son, he said. But his mother's precision. McGonagall looked at him and then at the empty wall. "Isn't that rather the point?" she said. She continued on to class. "Regulus presents the consolidation brief in September of Year 6. He is 35 years old. He looks 20 years older than that, which is the accumulated physical cost of maintaining soul anchor wards for 15 years, of the ring's curse managed but not eliminated, of 2 close-range Horcrux destructions that each extracted something from him that the body does not regenerate. His hands are steady, his voice is exactly what it has always been, spare, precise, every word load-bearing. What has changed is the quantity of him that the steadiness requires. He presents the Horcrux status without preamble. 4 remain. The cup, last confirmed in the Lestrange vault at Gringotts. The diadem, located in the Room of Requirement at Hogwarts, through a resonance scan Hermione had completed in August using a modified version of the Chamber's ward-reading framework. Nagini, with Voldemort at his current operational base in the Scottish Highlands, confirmed through Peter's last memory review. And the Scar fragment, sealed dormant, the ward architecture intact after 15 years, but present. The Scar is last. Regulus says, the ritual for that requires controlled conditions we haven't assembled yet. The other 3 we can move on. How long? James asks. Regulus looks at the table. This is the pause Harry has learned to read over 16 years. Not hesitation, not uncertainty, but the specific interval of someone calculating a number they have already calculated and are deciding how to present. 1 major operation, Regulus says. After that, the accumulated cost will take me out of the field permanently. I have that much left. He looks up, so we use it for everything. James looks at Sirius. Sirius looks at Remus. Something passes between the 4 of them that belongs to a history Harry was not present for. A history of decisions made badly, and decisions made well, and the specific weight that accumulates between people who have been in operational proximity for 20 years. One night, James says, the planning takes 3 weeks. James runs it at the dining room table with the same maps and contingency trees that have covered that surface since Harry was 6. But the scale is different now. Not a single site, not a single target, but a coordinated multi-vector operation with 2 primary objectives and a secondary sweep running simultaneously. He uses the same methodology he uses for everything. Complete information, complete preparation, minimum viable engagement, maximum documentary evidence for the legal record that will follow. The cup and the diadem are the Hogwarts objectives, Harry and Hermione. The diadem is in the school, which means access is controlled and the operation is lower risk. The cup requires a Gringotts extraction coordinated through Black family goblin contacts. Not a break-in, a formal reversion claim on the Lestrange vault's contents based on the criminal conviction proceedings still running from the graveyard operation. The Death Eater inner circle is the Manor objective. James and Sirius. Malfoy Manor has been the confirmed assembly point since Year 3 intelligence. The Death Eater network has contracted around Voldemort's current operational posture. Smaller, tighter, operating out of fewer locations, the inner circle meets at the Manor on the 2nd Friday of each month. The date is fixed. Remus coordinates from a mobile apparition point between the 2 sites. His secondary assignment, Nagini, Voldemort's confirmed location at the Scottish Highlands base, is known through Peter's latest review. On the same night, while James and Sirius work through the Manor list, Remus takes a 3-person team to the Highland base. Nagini cannot be left as an anchor. The timing requires all 3 objectives to resolve before dawn. Nagini is not straightforward, Remus says. At the planning stage, she is a living vessel. The destruction sequence is different from an object Horcrux. Regulus says, 3 times. Remus is quiet for a moment. I know what to do. The cost is that it won't be clean. Nothing about this night will be clean, James says. That's not the standard we're working to. Peter provides the final intelligence confirmation 48 hours before the operation. His monthly memory review shows the Manor meeting confirmed, attendee list current, Nagini's location fixed at the Highland base, no changes to the security arrangement. He reports this in the flat, uninflected way he reports everything now, not because he has made peace with his situation, but because peace is not what the Rat Protocol produces. The night is Friday, the 14th of November. Harry and Hermione enter the Room of Requirement at midnight. The room presents as a vast archive when they arrive, which is not what they asked for. They asked for the space most suited to locating a lost object, which is the canonical formulation, and the room has given them an archive because the diadem is not exactly lost. It has been here for decades, tucked into the accumulated debris of generations of students hiding things. The room knows where it is. It is showing them the category of space rather than the specific contents. Hermione finds it in 11 minutes using the resonance scanner. It is on a warped shelf behind a broken vanishing cabinet, exactly where the chamber's ward-reading methodology had predicted it would be. A soul-keyed object leaves a specific kind of impression on the magical architecture around it, like a note held too long in a room, and the impression is directional. Harry picks up the diadem. The scar fragment activates. He had known this was possible. Regulus had briefed him on it specifically. When two Horcrux vessels are in proximity, the fragments can achieve a temporary coherence, a momentary restoration of the consciousness they represent. It is not possession, it is resonance. The distinction matters technically and does not make the experience less significant. What he encounters is Tom Riddle's mind at the moment of the diadem's creation, not the current Voldemort, not the fractured, diminished, repeatedly discorporated consciousness that has been trying to kill him since before his memory begins. This is older, the mind that existed before the splitting became its own damage, brilliant, cold, methodical, and completely convinced of its own necessity. Harry holds it. He holds it the way Regulus taught him to hold a diagnostic, not resisting, not engaging, simply maintaining the boundary between observation and absorption. The occlumency architecture he has been building since age 8 is not a wall, it is a membrane. Permeable in one direction, impermeable in the other. He observes what is there, he does not let it observe him back. It lasts approximately 90 seconds. Then he applies the memory binding seal to the diadem's fragment, the same technique Regulus had used on the locket, the same he had used on the diary before its destruction. The same Black Family containment protocol that predates the modern classification of dark magic by 3 centuries. The resonance drops. The fragment is contained. Harry sets the diadem on the floor. Hermione is watching him from the other side of the shelf. She has the resonance scanner in one hand and her wand in the other, and she has not moved since the 90 seconds began. "It's done," he says. His voice is level. "We can proceed with the extraction." She does not move immediately. "Harry, it's sealed. The fragment is contained. I'm fine." She looks at him for a long moment, with the specific quality of attention she applies when she is deciding whether the information she has just received is complete, or whether it is the reduced version of a larger data set. She proceeds with the extraction. Together they apply the Horcrux destruction sequence, basilisk venom from the chamber's stored supply, carefully preserved since year 2, applied to the diadem's surface in the specific pattern Regulus had documented. The fragment dissolves in 40 seconds. The diadem becomes a tarnished piece of metal. They leave the room of requirement at 1:17 a.m. In the corridor, walking back toward Gryffindor Tower, Hermione says, "How many times have you done that? Held a resonance without telling anyone?" Harry is quiet for 3 seconds. 4, he says. Hermione says nothing for a long time. Not because she is angry, because she is recalibrating. Because she has spent 7 years believing she had a complete model of what Harry was managing, and has just received a single data point that suggests the model has been missing a category. She is, Harry understands, building the category now. She will ask him about the other 3 instances when she has a framework for the questions. She does not ask tonight. The manor operation runs from midnight to 2:09 a.m. What follows is a professional operation, and it will be described as such. James and Sirius entered the manor through the east boundary at 12:02, after Regulus's pre-laid wards disabled the outer perimeter detection sequence. Sirius neutralized the corridor surveillance. James worked from the list. They moved through the confirmed assembly point, the manor's formal dining room. 16 Death Eaters present, the meeting in its 3rd hour, with the cold efficiency of people who have been preparing for exactly this location and this configuration since 1982. They did not announce themselves. They did not offer terms. They applied maximum containment in minimum time, working the room in the sequence Regulus had prioritized by threat level. Bellatrix Lestrange fought longest. She was, Harry would be told later by Sirius in a voice that contained no triumph and no satisfaction, only the flat factual register of someone describing something they had been waiting a long time to describe. Extraordinary. Decades of committed dark magic practice, in a body that has never carried a soul anchor cost, a dueling instinct that is genuinely creative rather than merely practiced, a specific kind of dangerous that does not require a plan because it reads the situation faster than most people plan. She broke 3 of James's containment bindings before they held. She nearly reached the exterior wall twice. She was still losing. The specific nature of the loss was not power differential. Sirius was not more powerful than Bellatrix. He was more prepared. He had spent the previous year running through every documented confrontation she had survived, every casting pattern she had demonstrated at the Longbottom House in 1981, every tactical tendency Regulus had observed during her Death Eater service, and filed in the operational archive. He knew her the way Regulus had taught Harry to know everything that might be an adversary, completely in advance, with the time spent before the engagement that most people spend during it. When she was down, he stood over her and said, "This took longer than it should have." She looked up at him from the binding. Her expression was many things, none of them fear. "You've been practicing," she said. "I've been waiting," Sirius said. She was brought in alive. This was the decision James had made in the planning, for specific reasons that Sirius had agreed with, even though agreeing had required effort. A dead Bellatrix Lestrange is a martyr. A tried Bellatrix Lestrange is evidence. At 2:31 a.m., Remus's cipher signal arrived. Nagini. Confirmed. Done. 3 words, the flat declarative register of someone who has completed a task he knew would be costly, and has chosen at this particular moment not to elaborate on the cost. The cipher confirmed. The Highland base was cleared. Voldemort's last external anchor was gone. The team was intact. Remus would explain the details when he was ready. The signal was enough. Harry read it in the room of requirement, where he and Hermione were completing the Gringotts coordination for the cup extraction. He passed it to Hermione without comment. She read it, was quiet for a moment, and then continued working. The cup's destruction was completed by Regulus the following afternoon. He applied the basilisk venom himself, in the same methodical sequence he had used for the locket and the ring. And when the fragment dissolved, he sat with the empty cup for a while without explaining what he was doing. Harry watched from the doorway and did not ask. That was the 4th Horcrux Regulus had destroyed with his own hands. He had not counted aloud. The trial of Bellatrix Lestrange ran across 4 days in March. The chamber was public, as James had requested, and the Wiesengemot had been unable to refuse, given the documented evidence weight. There was no obliviation. The Ministry Obliviator Corps had been under new management since the Year 3 restructuring, and the new management had a different policy on what constituted appropriate application of the modification charm. The evidence record ran to 60 pages. Death Eater activity across a decade, each action documented, witnessed, legally sourced. The Longbottom House evidence was the center of the record's second day. Photographs, magical forensics, the wand trace analysis that established the specific casting patterns used on Frank and Alice Longbottom on the 26th of October, 1981. Frank and Alice Longbottom attended on the second day and gave testimony. They attended because Lily Potter's neurological charm research had been running for 14 years, incremental and unglamorous, and conducted with the specific patience of someone who considers the problem solvable and the timeline secondary to the rigor. The recovery was partial, not complete, not the restoration of what they had been before, but sufficient. Frank's testimony was given with the careful, slightly halted delivery of someone working through memories that had been inaccessible for years. Alice's was quieter. Neither of them showed anything except the composed, considered quality of 2 people who had waited a very long time for the correct room to say what they needed to say. Neville Longbottom sat in the gallery. Harry sat 3 seats from him. He did not look at Neville during his parents' testimony. He did not need to. Bellatrix Lestrange was convicted on all charges on the 4th day. The vote was 44-2, and the 2 were noted. The mythology had depended on distance, on Death Eaters as a category of person who operated in the dark, whose specific actions were rumored rather than documented, whose ideological commitment could be romanticized precisely because it was never made accountable in open court. The trial produced accountability, 4 public days of it. Every action, every victim, every decision made in full knowledge of what was being done. After the 4th day's verdict, Harry stood in the corridor outside the chamber while the gallery cleared. Sirius found him there. They stood together without speaking for a while. "The scar fragment," Sirius said eventually. "That's what's left." "Yes," Harry said. Sirius looked at him, and then one. "The scar fragment. Voldemort himself," both addressed through the same ritual. After that, nothing. They walked out of the ministry into the March afternoon, and neither of them said anything about how close Regulus was to the edge of what he had left, and neither of them needed to. Regulus presents the scar calculation in April. He does not preface it. He does not build toward it. He sits at the Grimmauld Place dining room table with the consolidated Horcrux file and the arithmetic schematic that Lily has been developing for 15 years, and he says, "The fragment in the scar is the last anchor. The question of its destruction has one viable answer and one secondary answer. The viable answer requires Harry to enter a controlled near-death state. The secondary answer requires Harry to actually die." Harry says, "I know." Regulus looks at him. "Since the diadem," Harry says, "the resonance showed me the ward architecture from the inside. I've known what it would take since November. You didn't say anything. Neither did you. For 5 months. This is the specific kind of silence that belongs to two people who have been operating in the same information framework for long enough to recognize when they have both been carrying the same calculation independently and choosing, for reasons that are not quite the same, not to surface it. Your mother has a solution, Regulus says. She's had a working version since year 4. She wanted to be certain before she presented it. He opens the schematic. Dumbledore comes to Grimmauld Place on a Wednesday in early May. He comes alone, which is the first acknowledgement that this is not an order visit or an institutional consultation. He knocks. Lily opens the door. She looks at him for a moment with the expression she reserves for situations she has been prepared for and has not looked forward to, then steps back and lets him in. He speaks to Harry in the library. James is not in the room, which is also a choice, and one Harry understands. James in that conversation would not be able to remain in the register the conversation requires. Dumbledore's tone is not unkind. His reasoning is not wrong. He presents what he knows, the scar fragment, the anchor, the magical logic that has been true since October 1981, with the care of someone who has rehearsed the conversation and understands the weight of what he is asking. He tells Harry that the fragment must be destroyed, that Harry must be the one to walk into that destruction willingly, that the willingness is the mechanism. "I know," Harry says. Dumbledore looks at him. "We've been working on the method for 6 years, Harry says. Mum has a solution that doesn't require actual death. Near death, under controlled conditions with the fragment expelled rather than destroyed through the host." He pauses. "We didn't need your intervention, but I think you needed to make it." Dumbledore is quiet for a long time. The library's afternoon light comes through the window at an angle that catches the silver of his beard and the lines around his eyes, which are deeper than they were when Harry first met him. "I had a plan," Dumbledore says, "for what would happen after, for how the war would end." "I know," Harry says. "We found it in the correspondence files, the Horcrux research you'd done independently, the path you'd identified." He looks at him steadily. "We disagreed with the conclusion. My conclusion required your death. Yes, my mother's doesn't." Dumbledore looks at the shelves, at the Black family grimoires, at Remus's reference materials, at the specific architectural density of a library that has been used as an operational intelligence resource for 16 years rather than a collection. "Then I hope she is right," he says. "She is," Harry says. "She's been right about the arithmetic framework since the beginning. You just didn't have access to her working papers." He does not say this as a provocation. He says it as the accurate observation it is, and Dumbledore receives it as such. He stands to leave, and at the door he pauses in the way he has paused at every door in every conversation Harry has had with him, as though each exit requires a brief assessment of what has and hasn't been said. "You've done well," Dumbledore says. "All of you." "We had good teachers," Harry says. This is not entirely a compliment and not entirely its opposite. Dumbledore hears both meanings and the door closes behind him. The ritual is performed on the 14th of May, in the Grimmauld Place ritual chamber. Lily has prepared it for a week. The chamber's floor carries chalk architecture that took 40 hours to complete, the Soul Anchor Ward's original binding sequence, the one laid into Harry's bassinet on October 31st, 1981, rendered in reverse. Inversion rather than containment. Expulsion rather than sealing. The mathematics are precise in the way that Lily's mathematics are always precise, which means they have been checked 11 times, and the 11th check produced the same result as the first. She explains the procedure to Harry once, in full, without simplification. He asks 3 questions. Her answers are complete. He nods. James holds his hand throughout. He sits in the center of the circle, and James sits beside him on the floor, which is not part of the ritual architecture and requires no magical function whatsoever. It is simply where James is. His hand is around Harry's, and he does not speak, and he does not let go. Sirius is at the door. He cannot watch. He has said this to Regulus, in the kitchen, at 6 a.m. on the morning of the ritual, in the quiet way that Sirius says things he has actually assessed rather than performed. "I can't watch him go under again." Regulus had not argued with this. He had simply said, "You don't have to watch. You have to be there. Sirius is there." He stands at the door with his back partly to the room and his arms crossed, and his jaw in the specific set that means he is making himself stay. Lily begins. The first 3 minutes are the preparation phase, the ward architecture awakening in sequence, the chalk lines brightening in the specific response pattern she had predicted and had verified in miniature across 4 years of controlled tests. The light is not dramatic, it is clinical. It is the specific illumination of old magic responding to its own design being inverted. The near-death state is not comfortable. Harry has been briefed on this and finds the briefing accurate and insufficient simultaneously. The sensation of the vital systems reducing, the ward architecture pulling them down to the minimum viable threshold, the specific quality of cold that is different from the Dementor cold, belonging to a category that has no prior reference point. He holds James's hand. James does not flinch. The fragment begins to move at the 6-minute mark. Harry feels it as a pressure behind the scar. Not pain, something more structural. The sensation of an object that has been embedded in the same position for 17 years beginning to shift. It does not want to leave. This is not metaphor. Soul fragments have enough coherence to resist extraction. Regulus had documented this across 4 prior destructions, each one requiring sustained pressure against the fragment's anchoring instinct. What breaks the fragment's anchor is the ward architecture itself, the soul anchor that has held it dormant for 17 years, running on the original arithmetic design, inverts its polarity at the precise mathematical threshold Lily has calculated, and the fragment has no purchase. It is expelled. It manifests above the chalk circle in the specific form that Harry had encountered in Voldemort's consciousness during the diadem resonance, small, dark, and making a sound that is not quite a voice, not an echo of Tom Riddle, the residue of what was cut from him long before Tom Riddle became the name people were afraid to say. Regulus steps forward. What he does takes 40 seconds. It is the soul dissolution sequence from the Black Family Grimoire's 7th volume. The technique he has used, in modified forms across 4 prior destructions, each time extracting something from himself that does not regenerate. This is the last time. He has known since September that this is the last time, which is why he chose it for this. Because if there is one thing in the list of things Regulus Black has done that the cost is unambiguously worth, it is this one. The fragment dissolves. Harry's vital signs return under Lily's monitoring. His heart restores rhythm within 4 seconds. He opens his eyes. James is still holding his hand. The scar on his forehead is still there. It will always be there. But the cold is gone. The resonance is gone. The presence that he has been aware of at the edge of his perception since the diadem. That he has been aware of, he now understands. At the edge of his perception since before his memory begins, is gone. He is only himself. He looks at Regulus, who is standing at the edge of the chalk circle with his hands at his sides and his expression in the specific register that means he is managing the cost and will continue managing it and does not require acknowledgement. "Thank you," Harry says. He sits down on the bench against the wall. "Give me a minute." Every anchor is now gone. Nagini, destroyed by Remus's team in November. The cup, destroyed by Regulus in the same operation. The diadem, Harry and Hermione in the room of requirement. The scar fragment, expelled and dissolved 20 minutes ago. The diary, the ring, the locket, all preceding years, all confirmed. 7 pieces, all gone. Tom Riddle is as mortal as anyone alive. More mortal, perhaps. He has been fragmenting himself since 1970, and what remains of him is something that has been refusing death for so long it has forgotten how to stop. Harry knows this. Sitting in the ritual chamber with his father's hand still in his, and the smell of chalk and old magic in the air. He files it with everything else he has been filing since he was 7 years old, under the heading that has been accumulating entries for his entire life. When the time comes, be ready. Voldemort's attempt on the Ministry comes 6 weeks later. The intelligence had been running through Peter's final review and through Remus's field network for 3 months. Voldemort, now fully mortal, operating with the specific desperation of a consciousness that has lost every anchor and knows it. The coup attempt is a last gambit play, Ministry control as a substitute for the immortality network he no longer has. He brings 11 Death Eaters and everything he has. Harry is in the Ministry corridor at 2 a.m. He has been there since midnight. The duel is short. This is not because Harry is overwhelmingly powerful. He is capable, trained, operating at a level that would be remarkable by any standard measure. It is short because Harry has spent years building an analysis of Voldemort's casting patterns, documented from the Graveyard Exchange and Peter's intelligence and Regulus's archived Death Eater correspondence, and the specific information the Diadem Resonance had provided about Voldemort's foundational magical assumptions. He knows, before the first spell is cast, what the second spell will be, and the third, and the point at which Voldemort will shift from offense to forced survival mode. He designed the counter before the engagement began. He is implementing it. Voldemort casts with the full force of what remains. He is extraordinary and diminished at once. The raw power still present, the architectural intelligence still operative, but something missing in the casting that Regulus had once named to Harry as soul weight, the magic of a man who no longer has enough of himself left to make the intent fully coherent. The killing curse rebounds, not through prophecy, not through sacrificial love invoked in the moment, through mathematics, Lily's arithmetic modification to the original ward design, which Harry carries in his blood, which the rebounding curse encounters not as a helpless target, but as an architecture built specifically to redirect it. The same logic that caught the fragment in 1981. The same design, inverted again, completing its own circle. Tom Riddle dies in a ministry corridor at 2:17 a.m., with no audience beyond the 11 Death Eaters, who are in the process of being bound by the prepositioned Auror team that James has been coordinating with Clara Finch's office for 2 months. He does not make a speech. He does not have a final moment of understanding or revelation. He simply stops, which is the most honest version of what death is, and the floor is cold and the corridor is lit by standard ministry sconces, and there is nothing here that requires a different register than that. Harry stands over him for a moment. Then he files the after-action report he has drafted in his head since midnight and goes home. The High Council of Magical Britain is inaugurated in September. It is imperfect. Every governance structure built by human beings is imperfect, and this one carries the specific imperfections of something assembled under time pressure from the wreckage of a structure that did not serve the people it was meant to serve. The noble house representatives bring their hereditary authority and their historical blind spots simultaneously. The elected scholars bring their expertise and their inexperience with institutional politics. The Muggle-born representative provision, Hermione's amendment, passed in the second governance session after a 40-minute argument with 3 separate noble house members that she won on procedural grounds, before winning it on substance, is the most contentious and most necessary thing in the founding charter. Hermione takes the first seat on the policy committee. She also enrolls in arithmetic research at the Wizarding Academy of Scotland, because she has 15 years of arithmetic theory accumulated in 7 notebooks, and a working schematic for a soul magic framework that Regulus says, reading the latest draft in his Grimmauld Place bedroom, is the most rigorous theoretical construction he has encountered that he himself did not write. She and Harry work in the same building. They do not need the same room. Dumbledore attends the inauguration. He stands in the gallery and watches the council's first formal session, and his expression is the expression of a man looking at a structure he did not build, built in the space where a different structure was supposed to stand. Afterward, in the corridor outside, he finds Harry. "I had a different plan," he says. "I know," Harry says. "We found it in your papers. We disagreed." Dumbledore is quiet. "I see that," he says. He says nothing further. He looks at the council chamber doors, closed now behind the day's last session, and then he looks at Harry, at the scar, at the rings on both hands, at the specific quality of settled that belongs to someone who has been where they are going for long enough that the destination and the person have become the same thing. Then he steps back. Not away, back. The precise movement of a man who has spent 70 years being the most indispensable figure in any room, making the deliberate choice, in this one room, in this one moment, to become something smaller and more honest. He was wrong about the method. He was right about the worth of the fight. Harry knows both things are true simultaneously, which is the only register in which they can both be honored. "Good work," Dumbledore says. Yes, Harry says, it was. Regulus Black died on a Tuesday, in his own bed, at Grimmauld Place, with Sirius's hand in his and the smell of old books in the air. He was 36 years old. He had destroyed 4 Horcruxes, outlasted a Dark Lord, and seen his nephew grow into something that required a new word. He died having been useful. In the House of Black, this was the highest honor. Let us know what you'd like to see next.